June 19, 1865 is an annual reminder that God brought the African American out of slavery. So what am I saying here? Help me, Holy Ghost. That Deuteronomy chapter 5:15 points to Egypt. And every week on Friday, from Friday at sundown to dark on Saturday, the Jew has the opportunity to sit, reflect, and remember what God did, how their life could still be so different if God hadn't done that for them, that God actually made a way, sent a person, let's call him a politician, sent somebody in and used them, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses, and God brought them out. And Moses, we know he thought that he was incapable, that he wasn't qualified to stand before the Pharaoh and say, God said, let my people go to worship me. Well, the day came that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. That night before was called Freedom Eve, where all African American, the enslaved and the free in the United States of America, they sat and they watched. That's why it was called Watch Night. They watched for the turning of the clock from December 31st, 1862 to January 1, 1863, and they waited for word that U.S. President Abraham Lincoln had indeed signed their freedom into the books. Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. We are wrapping up our Juneteenth observation. Today at 3 p.m., the Gulfport Citywide Festival in Westside Park is taking place. It's a wrap-up of a week-long Juneteenth celebration. You guys might have seen some of the posts that I have been posting down at City Hall with the youth. Praying God I find another device. I did a service of the ecumenical service, and I can't find the device. I have totally misplaced the device. I'm praying God that it is manifested somewhere finds it and gets it to me so that I could put that video out also. We're on YouTube. Evangelist Patricia Ann Batiste on YouTube if you want to see some of the Juneteenth observations. But what we're doing here today, we're wrapping up Juneteenth. And on Youth Day, I participated in a program called Youth Day for Juneteenth. And at Youth Day, what I'm doing today is I'm sharing historical research tools and showing all the books and paperworks and newspapers that I have used in the last 50 years to research our family history. I'm sharing that today. Well, my goal in Youth Day was to teach young children, elementary age children, how to research their own family history. I was really interested in motivating them, their curiosity to ask questions. How do I get started writing my family history? I talked to one author, her name is Jewel Nolan, who participated in Youth Day with me. She read her book, The Tale of the Dingy Handkerchief. The children seemed to enjoy that book. So what we did was I wrote a book. I want to read a little bit from this book. So the whole key, the event started with me saying something like, so you want to write a book about your family's history. You want to write a book. And then I said, it all starts with questions. Questions about who your parents are, what's their name. You can't assume children today know who their daddy is, who their mommy is, because a lot of time grandparents are raising their kids. So it starts with asking, I told the children, who your parents are, what are their names? Do you know how to spell it? I asked one child what was his mama's name, and he gave me her nickname. And I said, what's her real name? And he couldn't give me his mother's real name. So this child, first generation, would have a problem starting with research. So the question he has right now is, what is my mama's name? What's her real name? Then we talked about what is a maiden name, the name of mommy before she marries daddy. Then we got into, well, who are your mom's mom? Who are your grandparents? What are their names? What was grandmother's maiden name? And so on and so forth. And where did they live? So I wanted to show them how to write a book. So I got this little booklet, and I've titled this Curiosity: Questions Make for a Good Family Book on History. And it starts out something like this. I'm not going to read the whole book. It's very short, but 24 pages long. But I'm going to just read up to the point of the question. It said, when I was a girl, I didn't know who I was. Understand that what I'm reading will lead to this 40-year project, this book being published 40 years after the question was formed in me. It said, when I was a girl, I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know where I came from. I lived in a house with 4 sisters and 1 brother. And our mom lived there too, but she worked a whole lot. All of my siblings had dads. My mom had a dad too. I didn't look like any of my sisters or my brother. They were all happy and laughing, and I couldn't even put on a smile. I was skinny and they were mostly thick. Stuff like that made me wonder, who am I? Who do I look like? Where did I come from? That is the question. That is where I want to stop. Who am I? Let me see what the last one. Where did I come from? Okay, yeah, that's where I want to stop. I didn't know who I was. I wanted to know who I was. And so years later, when I was 15 years old, this was written in 1998. I'm not reading it. It's a booklet that entails our family's history. Well, that one doesn't have it there, but this is the one from 2013. This little booklet from 2013, which started out in 1998, has our family's history. And it says, I'm going to read what I wrote about this. Who am I? Where do I come from? Who do I look like? Some years ago, I heard for the first time the story of Mary and Jack Eugene. Note from birth, his name was Jacques Eugene, Jacques. He was French. And it was pronounced with a French accent. From what I understand, they are my maternal great-great-grandparents. And this is their story, which was orated by my great aunt, Lizzie Eugene Wright, right here. While grasping in my hand copies of the original paper, who wrote their story, which was orated from her deathbed, better known as Aunt Sis, for the benefit of generations that would come after her. She told this story about her family's history, her mom, her dad, her granddad, her grandma, and her great uncle. Before she would take her last breath, good morning, Newland. Before she would take her last breath, she told someone, come here, sit down, get some pencil and paper and write down what I say. Newland, this morning we're talking about overcoming exclusion by acts of inclusion. And we're wrapping up our Juneteenth holiday celebration, and we're talking history. For the record, the Jews are constantly reminded every week that what God did and how he brought them out of Egypt on the Sabbath day. They meditate on that as they fellowship with one another over meals. So Aunt Sis left some papers, which were 5 sheets of papers, and she said, sit down, write what I say, write what I tell you. While grasping, it says, for the benefit of generations that will come after her. Generations coming after her is what was important. She had, before she would die, she had in mind, I have to tell this story so that generations will come, 100 years, 20 years, 50 years, somebody will know our history in the family. And that just so happened to be me. While grasping in my hand copies of the original papers about her father, her mother, it became my self-imposed duty to continue with the distribution of our family history after having digested them myself. They became like water to me. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I came from. I didn't know who I looked like. And when I read these papers, it was like drinking a fresh, cold glass of water. It was quenching my thirst. And I ingested it. So it became my self-imposed duty to continue on with the distribution of our family history as I digested it myself after I got it, after I understood it. I would put this out and I would tell this story for the rest of my life. And it has now been almost 55 years. 50 years or so that I have been working with these 5 sheets of paper telling the story of the Thompson Eugene family history, that we would not be erased, that we would be remembered. I had hoped even someday to expand upon it in the form of a book and leave in some written form so as to leave a clear path of this family's lineage for generations that will come after Aunt Sis did, like it did for us. That work is not yet complete because the document needed a name, and I called it the family notes. She just left some sheets of paper and it didn't have any name. Today it's called the legacy papers. It started out being called the family notes, considering they were the first distributed at the annual family reunion. It was my intention to continue circulating this information. I would learn early on that contrary to my zeal, there had been much headlining of individual families. It's important headlining of individual families, and it would cause strife in the family because the family would get in fights and said, whose name is going to go on the t-shirt? Is it going to be this person's name? Is it going to be that last name? And after doing my diligent research, it is the Thompson Eugene name that goes on the t-shirt because there were 5 daughters and the daughters married out, and there were 3 sons in the Eugene family. And their daughters, when they married out, they married Johnson, they married Williams, they married Batiste, they married Labiches, they married different people. So it became incumbent upon me to explain to them the importance of a maiden name, that the maiden name of our ancestor is Eugene. And before she married Mr. Eugene, she was a Thompson. So the name becomes hyphenated. Thompson Eugene. Thompson is our earliest ancestor's name. And I had to break this down in the book. And I had a little cousin named Capucci. And Capucci said, "Oh, Mama," when he read the book and he understood, he said, "We are Eugene. We really are Eugene." And that was a lot because his last name was Riley. And coming from the Belvins, we're not Belvins, Mama. We are Eugene. It's important. I'm not going to read all of this, but this portion of the book talks about how I got motivated. And I got motivated because I didn't know who I was. I'm going to read the first line of each of the letters, the first paragraph, which is just a sentence of each about the parents. Aunt Sis wrote, my father, Jack Eugene, was born in the yard of his mother's white people, Mr. Placide Ories. The Ories were prominent families here in St. John the Baptist Parish. They were Frenchmen. I know 3 brothers. They owned the plantation, the Ori plantation. Of course, it is still owned by them now, but it is now called the San Francisco Plantation. My father's mother was Henrietta Jackson, and she was the mother of 2 children, my father and Mary Louise. This is what she wrote about her mother. My mother, Mary Thompson Eugene, was of Indian descent and born in St. Charles. The place is now called St. Rose, Louisiana. Her father, Charlie Thompson, was Indian. There were 2 brothers, Charlie Thompson and Sam Thompson. Charlie was a blacksmith and he shot at horses. Her mother's name was Millie Williams Thompson. Millie Williams Thompson. So what am I saying? Today we are wrapping up Juneteenth. As I talked about in Deuteronomy chapter 5, God tells Moses to speak to the people of Israel, to speak to the Jew, the Jewish heritage, the Hebrew, speak to them and tell them this. In verse 15, he says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that I, the Lord your God, rescued you by my great power and strength. And this is my command to you, that you observe the Sabbath. God was saying to Israel and is saying to the Jew, and they still observe it today. You know, when you look at the documentaries and if you watch Al Jazeera, if you watch the BBC News, which is international news, you'll see on Friday millions of people going out for a day of prayer on Friday. It's their day of rest. It's their day off. It's their day to sit and eat meals with family and rest in the Lord and meditate on everything that God has done for them. And God is saying here through Moses, the one thing that you should remember on the Sabbath is that I, the Lord your God, brought you out of Egypt with my strong, mighty hand. This is the one thing every week that the Jewish people are to meditate on, that it was the Lord our God that brought us out of Egypt. And Juneteenth, as I stated before, just like Deuteronomy chapter 5:15 points them to Egypt and to remember the bondage that God delivered them from, Juneteenth, June 19, 1865, points the African American to Galveston, Texas, to the United States of America. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, June 19, 1865, points the African American to a day of jubilee, a day that had been long waited for. The emancipation didn't free everybody because the emancipation didn't get to everybody. And I like to say, I'm going to research this title, Texas Hold'em. Where did that come from? I believe Texas Hold'em had to do with holding the African American in slavery for 2.5 years more after the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't know. I'm just saying. Texas Hold'em. Where did that come from? Is it just a cliche? Or does it have some history in June 19, 1865, between January 1, 1863 and June 19, 1865, because Texas was holding the enslaved, even though they were free. So what we're looking at today is African American history and what does Juneteenth mean. And what I want today to do today is to encourage curiosity. Is there something in you that a question that is in you that maybe regarding your family that you never knew, that you wondered about? Today, I'll be doing an exercise, and on one side of the paper, it says, what do you know? On the other side of the paper, it says, I wonder. I wonder this. I wonder that. I wrote what I wondered on the board already. I wrote, I wonder who I look like. I wonder where I came from. I wonder why I don't look like my family. I wonder why all of my sisters and brothers have dads and I don't. Where did I come from? Has there ever been a question in you that has gone unasked? And here is the thing before I close. I told the children on Thursday, questions make for a good family book on history, having questions. My questions wasn't just, who's my mom? I knew who my mom was. Who's my sister? I knew them. I knew who my grandparents were. And to tell you the truth, when Aunt Sis left those papers, it became like water to me. But honestly, I didn't want to know about that side of my family. I wanted to know about my dad. I wanted to know where he was. I wanted to know why he wasn't in my life. But all I had was these 5 sheets of paper that Aunt Sis left, and it talked about who her mother was and who her dad were and who her grandparents were and who her uncle was and where they lived. Even though it wasn't about what I wanted to know, it still quenched a thirst in me. And 40 years after the fact, this book was published. This book went from this to this to this, and finally to this. 40 years after the fact, that book was put in place, and it all came from a little girl wondering, who do I look like? Where did I come from? Why don't I look like them? Why don't I have a dad? It gave me a drive. And even though it wasn't something that side of the family I wanted to know about, the more I learned about them, the more I got to digging. And I got to digging. Aunt Sis said in the notes that her dad was Indian. Well, y'all know how we are in Black America. We all got Indian in us. That's what we all say. We all Indian. Well, when I went back and I looked at the 1870 census, let's see if I can find it here. It revealed that Aunt Sis was right. You see this right here? This is the 1870 U.S. federal census, and it listed all in the household except one child, who was the eldest son. I guess over time his complexion started changing. The sun hit him and he looked black. But all 7 people in the house, I think it was 7, 5 girls, 5 children, 2 parents, were all listed as mulatto. Mulatto meant a mixed breed. We know you ain't black. We know you ain't white, but we don't know what you are. You are a mixed breed. And Aunt Sis said her dad was Indian and that her mother was of Indian descent. So that was confirmed. The point I want to make now is my 40 years of curiosity. After mother saw I wouldn't quit digging. I kept writing. I kept revamping the book. I started adding pictures to the book. Mother took us to San Francisco Plantation, the former Ori Plantation. And I'm telling this story for a reason, because I want to get you motivated and excited and asking questions. In the book, Aunt Sis said the Ori Plantation used to be called it's now called the San Francisco Plantation. And when we went to the plantation, to the bookstore, what do they call it? The shop, the boutique, the shop, to buy little memorabilia. I looked at Mother and I said, Mother, are you sure this is the place? I say, because I don't see nothing that say Ori in this place. It says some man named Edmond Marmolion owned the plantation, that he built the plantation, and who his wife was and who his daughters were and this and that. I say, Mama, are you sure this is the place? Mother, with an attitude, said, this is the place. That was in Aunt Sis's notes. Aunt Sis wrote about her town. She talked about the post office. She talked about the U.S. Census. She talked about it all. So I went to the curator in the shop and I said to the curator in the shop, was this place ever owned by a family called Ori, O-R-Y? Little white girl. She was, let's say, ominous, not receptive of the suggestion. She said, no, that family has never been tied to this plantation, and I know everything about this property. And I'm like, Mother is saying this is the place. This lady is saying, no, we don't have any such people tied to that. A month later, I went back to the website of the San Francisco plantation, and there was a single paragraph added into the history. I have the before and the after print. It says that the Ori family owned the plantation, and it didn't say a date or a time. It just said, and they didn't do much work to the plantation. Okay. And that was early on. I wasn't even ready to write the book at the time. So when I got ready to publish the book, I went back and I said, let me do some research, and I want to see what they say about the Ori family up to date. Well, they said that the Ori family owned the plantation round about the year of 1950. My great-great-granddaddy was born in 1863. I said, ain't no way the Ori plantation, that the Oris owned the plantation in 1950, because my granddaddy born in 1863. And if he was born in the backyard of his Ori's family, then he had to be born in 1950, according to what these people are saying. So I went back to the U.S. archives, and I looked through the U.S. archives, and I found in 1870, I think it's 1870, 1890. 1880. I found them in 1880 on the same property with a family called Ori's, and that our family was on that same property. And this was during Reconstruction. That means after the American Civil War, when they were still trying to build Louisiana back up from the Civil War. I'm saying all that to say this. My aunt wrote 5 sheets of paper. And those 5 sheets of paper contradicted everything that was being said in the town that she grew up with. And I wrote in the book, I said, this matter is continuing to be researched and will be developed over a period of time to see if the current history, according to the San Francisco plantation curator or the notes of my aunt, is true. Well, that research has concluded that it's true that my great-great-grandfather, born in the backyard of the his Ori's white people, and Ori's white people implied that they were his parents, that one of the boys was his parent. And I successfully found his mother, and I'm about to start working on that book. Her name was Cora Higginbotham. I found her. So I know that Cora Higginbotham had a son by one of the Ori brothers, and I'm about to start researching and writing that book. So what am I saying? When I was a young girl, let me read this one more time. When I was a young girl, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I came from. I lived in a house with 4 sisters and 1 brother, and my mom lived there too. and she worked a lot. All of my siblings had dad and I had none. My mom had a dad too. I didn't know who I looked like, where I come from. They were always happy and laughing, and I couldn't even put on a smile. I was thin and they were thick. Stuff like this made me wonder, where do I come from? Who do I look like? Good morning, Pastor Jerry. Where do I come from? Who do I look like? So this book is now in the U.S. Library of Congress. The title of today's message is Overcoming Exclusion with Acts of Inclusion. America has strategically excluded the African American experience from history. We have down in Florida the governor, DeSantis, who is banning books to say we don't want to know the history of Greenville. We don't want to know what happened at Rosewood. We don't want nobody telling our kids that this stuff happened. We don't want to know nothing about Tulsa. You can't have that in our library. But this book is in the U.S. Library of Congress. This is my family's history, and it goes back to the year of 1671, which basically tells me all of our grandparents, they weren't Negroes. You know, it started out somewhere. Plantation owner, hooking up with a slave, make some babies. Charlie and Sam came out. Charlie and Sam ended up in Louisiana, married to my great second generation great grandparents. What am I saying? You're saying, we're supposed to be here for church today. We're supposed to be here talking about God. I did talk about God. I said in Deuteronomy chapter 5:15, Moses told the people that God said that I command you to observe the Sabbath. And on that day, I want you to remember that it was the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt with a strong hand. And I'm saying to you, every week on the Sabbath day, Friday at sundown till dark on Saturday, the Jew meditates on the fact that God brought them out of Egypt. So Deuteronomy chapter 5:15 points every week, it points the Jew back to Egypt. And God is saying to the Jew, remember this happened I delivered you out of Egypt. Remember this every week. Take the time to reflect on this as you eat with your family, as you fellowship with one another, as you think about being grateful for who I am in your life. I say June 19th, 1865 points the Negro back to Galveston, Texas. It points us back to Galveston, Texas. And it says, remember this day, observe this day. We have only been observing Juneteenth now. This is the 4th year, I believe, since President Biden made it a national federal holiday. But did you know that Juneteenth, even though it is a federal holiday, is not recognized by the state of Mississippi? That Mississippi recognizes every Confederate holiday that they can name. But there have been petitions repeatedly to name Juneteenth as a state holiday, which would include the closing of businesses and banks. And Mississippi has said, no, we will not observe Juneteenth. We will not look to the day that the African American was free in the nation. Mississippi is still one of the most racist states in the nation. If you go and you look at education, if you go and you look at voting laws, if you go and you look at welfare reform, Medicare, if you go and they don't want, Governor Reeves denied summer feeding program funding to feed kids during the summer in the state of Mississippi. Juneteenth, 1865, June 19, 1865 says there is still much work to do. But before I close, what I want to say that we cannot be content with just writing our family history. selling our family history and publishing it. The goal must be to put it in the U.S. Library of Congress. The U.S. Library of Congress is the Congressional Research Library for all of Congress. And it is the de facto library for the United States of America. It is the #1 library in the nation. And we cannot be content with just writing, selling, and publishing our history. We must add to the narrative. We must write, research, sell, publish, but we must have our history cataloged in the U.S. Library of Congress to put a seal of approval on what my great aunt said, that it was the Ori plantation, that he did born in 1863, that the Ori family was a prominent. And then the more I read and learned about the Ori family, they didn't just have one plantation called the Ori plantation. They actually had a network of plantations across Garyville, not just Garyville, across St. John the Baptist Parish. They had several. I think I counted like 9 to 13 because each kid had a plantation. You say, oh, she's getting excited about them having plantations. No, I'm excited about the fact that my aunt knew what she was talking about, that she left these papers for us to read. So I'm going to show you, and then we're going to close. This comes from, I'm going to read this from her. This had to do with her dad. Charlie Thompson was born in 1850 to his father, Charlie Thompson Sr. in South Carolina prior to the American Civil War. With the exception of his brother, Sam Thompson, there was no mention of any other individuals born to this family in the U.S. federal census. Not even a mother was mentioned. In the 1870 U.S. federal census, Charlie Thompson was found living in St. Charles, Louisiana, married to a Millie Williams and listed as a farm worker. Charlie, again found in 18 federal census, was found in St. Charles living with his wife Millie and 5 children. Henry Thompson, Lizzie Thompson, Norbert, Mary Thompson, Eugene, Charlie Thompson Jr., and Charity. There's one more thing I want to read on page 47, and I'm going to close. It said, today's technology is so amazing. It is also very frightening because you never know what you'll uncover. You never know who you're tied to. I say, however, one must brave through the fear if ever that which is buried shall come to see the light of day. Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, the GOP, the mega party, they don't want you to know your history. They don't want you to publish your history. They don't want you to tell your children that your existence went beyond your mom and dad. They don't want you to know anything. That is why they stripped the children and separated mama from babies and husbands from wives during Jim Crow South. I say, however, one must brave through the fear if ever that which is buried shall come to see the light of day. The new release of data by the United States Federal Census annually has allowed me to uncover much broader footprint of my Thompson Eugene family. I was able to go back to a time when my research in additional 3 generations, 1761, as it pertains to the Thompson branch of the family. Years prior to that, our mark had stopped with Charlie Thompson, who was born in 1850. It really frustrated me that I could go no further back. Blacks could not go further back than just before the American Civil War because we were chattel. We were not people. Don't y'all remember during the March for Freedom and everything, how the men, sanitary workers in Memphis had a sign that said, I am a man? It's important that we do research. It's important that we understand that June 19th, 1865 was the establishment. June 20th, 1865, everybody was legally free. It didn't mean things were good. It meant we were free. And we must understand what June 19, 1865 does. It points us back to Galveston, Texas. We must remember, but we must press on to be the people that we need to be. In the book of Timothy, Paul told Timothy about all the things that he should abstain from, all the things that he should include if he was going to be a vessel of honor. We cannot just be okay with our kids walking down the street with their underwear showing. We cannot be content with our kids killing each other on the street over a vape pipe. We cannot be content over having rebellious, disobedient children. We must train our young people that education is the way. We must train our young people that they must press forward. June 19, 1865 gave us the right to overcome the event of exclusion. And now we have the opportunity to have acts of inclusion, of researching our family history. I hope y'all come out today to the park at Westside Park at 3 p.m. I'm going to be sharing more on research tools. I'm going to be sharing more on getting started. And if you want to start a project to get your family's history in the book in the U.S. Library of Congress, I will help you. I will not charge you. I want to get more African American histories into the U.S. Library of Congress. And I thank y'all today. We're going to be at Westside Park. That's just off the beach in Gulfport at 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. for Gulfport's citywide Juneteenth Festival. It's the wrap up of a week-long Juneteenth celebration. But before I go, I want to say happy birthday to my sister Vanessa. Y'all have a great day over there for your birthday. Is it today or is it tomorrow? No, it's not tomorrow, today. It's either Monday or Tuesday, the 24th or 25th. But y'all, thank you for being with me. Every week, the Jew is reminded what God did for them by bringing them out of Egypt. We are given one day a year to be reminded of June 19, 1865. Well, happy birthday, my sister. We are reminded every year that God brought us, the enslaved, out of slavery 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. Let us not forget. Let us not forget. And let us be diligent. Some people ask me about my family history, how I did this. I write my family history every day. I mean, if I have an opportunity to do a news report, I write a news report. If I have an opportunity to do a broadcast on my family's history, I do a broadcast. If I have an opportunity to do a magazine article, I do a magazine article on my family history. You must promote your family history as if it is a business. You must be aggressive in teaching your young people. We have a family reunion every year. And it's very sad that many of the children, the younger generation, still don't know our family history because we have a party like everybody doing for Juneteenth. They having a festival today. We having a party. We just want to drink. We just want to eat. We want to dance. We don't want to hear nobody tell us about Aunt Sis. We don't want to hear nobody tell us about June 19, 1865. So this current generation in my family, they are still ignorant. But if one of them give me the opportunity to tell them anything about Aunt Sis, about the 5 sheets of papers, about my family, about the book being in the Library of Congress, I take every opportunity to promote my family's history, whether they want to hear it or not. Because at some point, I think this book is in the Library of Congress. When I got those 5 sheets of paper, 3 things happened. It became like water to me. the question of who am I? Where did I come from? It started filling up in me, even though it wasn't the side of the family I wanted to know about. And as I got better and understanding it, and the book went from this to this to this to this, and now this will be a children's book. I said, I want to put it in a book. I don't know how to write a book. And my niece Calibra started writing books. She writes like the Harlequin love stories, those things. And I said, let's pretend this is a sheet of paper. And she had a book. And I said, Niecy, how do you take this, a sheet of paper, and put it into this, a book? And in 2019, she told me in the summer how to do that. And by September, the book was published. So I had a desire to know more about me, to write a book. And I said, and before I die, I don't even know where that desire come from, because I didn't know nothing about the Library of Congress. I had a desire to have this book put in the Library of Congress. And the reason why I had a desire to put this book in the Library of Congress was, I said, if I die, somebody is going to remember 20 years from now, our family's history is in the Library of Congress. If my house burned up one point, if the house burns up and all the books are gone, if Amazon goes out of business and is no longer publishing this book is, as long as there is a U.S. Library of Congress catalog there. And somebody 100 years from now can say, I don't know, just like I remember the name Lizzie Eugene Wright. I may not remember everything else about what she wrote, but I do remember her name. I said, they're going to remember her name was Pian Batiste. She wrote a book and it's in the Library of Congress 100 years from now. My generation, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, 3-4 generations from now, they can go back to the Library of Congress and find their ancestors, their beginning. We cannot be content with just writing, researching, selling, publishing. We must add to the narrative. We must overcome exclusion by inclusion, by including our own family history. And that is my goal with this broadcast today, to encourage you to start a project. One more thing I told the kids. I said, how do you do research? I said, let's do Black history a little different this month. Sit down with an elder, start a conversation. Don't forget to return the recorder on and see what they have to say about your family's history. I said, sit down with an elder, start a conversation. Don't forget to turn the recorder on and see what they have to say about your family's history. Then I told them, you write down what you remember, you record, and you video. Every kid has a video, has a phone at their disposal these days. The goal is we must not let our seniors die with their stories in them. We must get it out of them. Granny don't know you got no recorder. Sit there and sit on the floor and just start talking to her and just record and see what she has to say. And I told the kids, I said, well, say something like, I'm working on a book report at school and I need to know about something about my family. And I was thinking maybe, Nana, you can help me. Or you could start saying, Nana, could you just tell me what things were like when you were little? Because I don't like it now. Start a conversation with old people, record them, document them, and see what they have to say about your family's history. When I first started doing this, old people would die. I would go and record them. I recorded my uncle, Wendy, on his deathbed in his hospital bed. And he told me a story about being shotgun married. And then he told me about a story how he was going from one room to the next room, having 2 daughters being birthed the same night in the same place by 2 different women. His daughter was in the room when he told the story. If she had not been there and I repeated the story, she said, you'd be telling a lie. My elders, I started recording, and basically they quit talking to me, those that exist, because I don't know, my interview is like the death mark, but I am on it. I'm not going to let you die without you telling me something about your family's history. And this is what I hope you gain from this broadcast today. Join us today if you can in Westside Park at 3 p.m. Come see me. I'll be under the gazebo. God bless you and have a great day.